Hey everyone, we are here to catch you up on hardware news for the past week or so. A few items here. First of all, thank you to Grant, one of our readers and viewers, for loaning us a Titan XP that we'll be working on this week. Be sure to subscribe and check back for that. We're doing a couple of mods on it and a review. But beyond that, the news for the past week, we've got some information on Intel and its discontinuation of IDF. We'll be talking about rising DRAM and DDR4 prices. Yes, they continue to rise and will continue to do so through the year. And then we have some video card announcements, launches, new monitors, flashing the 400 series, stuff like that to go over for releases and news for the past week. Before getting to that, this video is brought to you by the current bundle on the GTX 1060 and GTX 1080 video cards, where you can get Ghost Recon Wildlands or For Honor at checkout. This comes alongside new MSRPs for the GTX 1080 series cards, now down to $500. You can learn more at the link in the description below. Let's start off with DDR4 prices, since everyone's kind of thinking about that right now, especially with Ryzen and its actual advantages from faster DRAM. It's becoming more noticeable that the prices are rising. It's not just DDR4, DDR3 is going up too, and the primary reason is because there are really only 3 suppliers for the actual memory that is sold to Corsair, Kingston, G.Skill, anyone else you can think of. There are only 3 actual primary suppliers, and 2 of them, Samsung and Micron, are currently experimenting with new process. So they're looking at 18 and 17 nanometer options, and because they're spending that R&D effort, that means that there's less actual production for market consumption. So that means with lower supply, because they're investing in R&D, and one, there's a yield problem. So you lose more of your wafers trying to develop this smaller process stuff. And 2, it just takes time to do. So because of that, DRAM Exchange and TrendForce are estimating that DDR4 prices will continue to rise perhaps through 2017, and they're predicting an incremental rise on how much it's already increased, plus 12.5%. So we're looking at another 12.5% increase in price, at least through the year. There's no real end in sight right now. It could carry on. It's going to carry through second quarter for sure. 2017 might carry on throughout the rest of 2017. And then once Samsung and Micron start pumping more product into the market, things should recover a bit. But for now, it is still increasing. If you have not been following too closely, beyond the DDR4 stuff, DDR3's gone up a bit too, though people aren't buying that too much now. We were looking at some of our own kits we've purchased in the past couple years, and just looking at DDR4, we bought a kit in 2016. It was a G.Skill kit that was 2400 megahertz, DDR4, and 16 gigabytes, so 2x8. And that at the time was $81, 2016 February. And now, today, the same kit is $132. It's about a 60% increase year over year. And then previously, we had another one we bought in 2016 that was DDR3. Now, that's kind of going up anyway, just because there's less of it being made. But G.Skill, 1866 megahertz, 16 gigabytes, DDR3, it was $65. It is now $110. So that's another 65–70% increase. And then you've got even older stuff like Ripjaw's 2x4 kits that have increased about 34% or so. So yeah, DRAM is definitely going up in price. This is, if you have it and you don't need to buy stuff for a new build, probably just keep using what you have and run with it. Otherwise, good luck to you. So another quick news item here. This one is on the industry side. Intel canceled its IDF, or Intel Developer Forum 2017 conference. This conference has been around for quite a while now. So IDF is not only canceled this year, it is suspended indefinitely at this point. And that's for a few reasons. Intel says it's shifting into a more data-driven market. That's kind of something we can actually observe as well. And so on that front, they are hoping to push other events like Intel Technology and Manufacturing Day and Artificial Intelligence Day rather than IDF. And IDF has kind of become less of a developer forum and more of just a bunch of random technology. So it has kind of lost its way. It does kind of seem like it was time to retire it, but now it's kind of weird timing given Ryzen. It makes Intel look like they think there's a problem, whether or not they do. So just from a, we'll use the keyword optics standpoint, it's not a great look, but IDF is canceled indefinitely. There are replacements, but they are on the front of AI, data center stuff, and things that generally on our side of the industry we don't pay attention to. If that interests you, they have stuff out there still. but they do look like they're moving more towards Internet of Things, Optane, data center, artificial intelligence, and away from some of the other technologies that were discussed at IDF. And speaking of Ryzen from AMD, they also pushed their new Polaris refresh. So if you haven't followed our RX 500 series reviews, we've reviewed the 580, the 570, and have now done a 580 plus 480 Crossfire. It does actually work if you were curious. The cards are basically an update to BIOS and more mature silicon. So there's nothing special here. If you didn't already own Polaris, this is a bit faster but more power consumption. Not going to go through the whole thing because our reviews do that. You can check the reviews if you haven't followed it closely. The refresh is sort of similar to the 300 versus 200 series, where you get a bump in performance, although the 200 and 300 series had a couple of confusing things. If anyone remembers, I believe Tahiti, Tonga, and Hawaii all coexisted somewhat roughly within the same time frame, so that was a bit more confusing than today. But that launched, and then elsewhere in graphics, there's the new Corsair and MSI Hydro graphics card. MSI calls it Seahawk, Corsair calls it Hydro graphics. It's the same thing, just Corsairs can only be sold through Corsair.com. So that Seahawk is out for the 1080 Ti. We're going to be asking for one to review, if on loan at least. And that will be priced at $800, so it's one of the most expensive 1080 Ti's. Probably EVGA's hybrid, if they make one, would be around the same price point. We like to do head-to-heads with those, so be sure to check back. But that's a GP102, just like the rest of the 1080 Ti devices, and it's using a Corsair M120 Pro LED fan this time. So the fan is a bit different, I think, from the previous Seahawk series we looked at, and that's still on a 120mm radiator. They're using a maglev bearing, so it is a bit better of a fan, hence some of the price increase. As for the speeds, the stock speeds are configurable via 3 modes. There's Silent, which is 1480 bass and 1582 boost, Gaming, which is 1493 and 1607 bass and boost, and OC mode, which is 1506 and 1620 bass and boost. You can see MSI's influence there on the card. Memory speed runs at 11,016 megahertz for both Silent and Gaming mode, and OC mode boosts it up to 11,124 megahertz. Now, there's also been talk of flashing the 400 series cards into 500 series cards. It's not necessarily worth it. You could certainly do it though, and the gains may be worth it to you. It's kind of a personal thing really, but if you wanted to flash the devices, just to clear this up, you want to use ideally a BIOS that was built for the same card. So if you're trying to move something like an MSI Gaming X 480 to an MSI Gaming X 580, and we haven't tried this yet, so do it at your own risk, you would want to use the BIOS from that specific card, and don't mix and match BIOSes ideally. Now also, don't try and flash other cards, and Buildzoid pointed this out on his channel, don't try and flash a 470 with a 580 BIOS or something like that, because there's a chance that if it doesn't protect you from doing it, the card will no longer work, or it will be hamstrung. So that's always a risk you take, especially if you're mixing BIOSes with cards that they weren't meant for, even when scaling back a generation. So that is possible. It's something to look into. We'll probably be looking into it and seeing if it's worth doing. A few other people have already, but you can flash 400 series to 500 series in the same class, so 80 and 70. Other than that, we've got some display news for the week. So AOC has a new 40-inch display, and the name of it is, get ready for it, it's C4008 VU8. So that's their new display, and it is aimed at professionals and prosumers this time. So that means they're targeting something more like a production screen space and a more color correct display for prosumers. So the C4008 VU8 has a 10-bit VA panel and an 1800R curvature. The panel pushes a resolution of 4K at 60 Hz, and the screen can reproduce 85% of the NTSC color gamut and has a 5 millisecond response time. Connectivity is one VGA port if you need that, one HDMI 1.4, two HDMI 2.0, two DisplayPort 1.2, and four USB 3.0 hub with one fast charging port, which is somewhat common for panels nowadays. The panel is $850 on Newegg, which isn't unreasonable for 4K and 40-inch curved. We've got two more news items for you. There's a Fantex case, so the Evolve mITX case that's been around for a while has a tempered glass update. There is a 3mm tempered glass panel, as you might suspect, And it's got some changes internally, like bigger support for radiators. You can go up to 360 millimeters now in the front panel and 280 in the top, and longer GPUs are also supported. And there's RGB integration with the case alongside Fantex Velcro cable ties that they've been doing for quite some time. So that'll be coming to market soon. And then finally, in the list of upcoming hardware releases, BioStar has its mini ITX AM4 motherboards announced. Finally, we're starting to see some of those. So before getting to this one, if you haven't followed the coverage thus far, part of the reason for the ITX delay is because it is physically a bit more complicated to build these boards than previously. So some of the vendors we've spoken to have suggested that they have to add an additional layer to the PCB in order to get the ITX ready chipsets from AM4 on these motherboards, which means extra complexity in engineering. So they're spending more time with validation and building the boards. So that's been part of the delay, but they're starting to come out. So BioStar is among the first. They have their new ITX board that is supposed to be priced at $130 for the Racing X370 GTN. And then there's going to be a $109 board that uses a B350 chipset, also Racing B350 GTN. So these are not the X300 or AB300 chipsets, the very specific ITX ones. They are the more common B350 and X370 chipsets, but they'll be an ITX form factor. So you get a bit of both. X300 we certainly still want to look at when it actually comes out. But for now, it looks like there are some options coming up there in the $110 to $130 price point. We haven't actually reviewed these or had hands-on. Something to pay attention to. As always, thank you for watching. Subscribe for more. You can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus if you'd like to help us out directly with our in-depth testing that we're doing throughout the rest of the week. And as always, store.gamersnexus.net for the shirts. Subscribe. I'll see you all next time.